tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 590 for June 16th, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. I hope everyone had a great Father's Day. We are recording this at the very end of Father's Day, so...
And happy Father's Day to you, JD, the father of InSession Film, not just the father in his own family, the father of this family as well.
Yeah, appreciate that.
So major props to you as well, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was a really nice day. I got to hang out with my two boys. I made sure I spent a lot of time with them. It was really great. However, I did get some time to myself for Father's Day. And you know what I did? You know what I did, Brendan?
Well, you watched hockey, right?
I channeled my own Riley, and I laced up the skates, and I went to play some hockey, as I do.
Still winging? Still winging?
Still winging, absolutely. And
no questionable goals again this time.
No, I didn't score a goal in this game. However, there were two goals that we scored, and the whole game was insane. I don't really have the time to get into it now, but we were down 4 or 3. We were down 4-1. There was a huge scrum, fights everywhere. People kicked out of the game. Long story short, we ended up making
just
a
penalty
comeback.
box. They were kicked out of the game.
Kicked out of the game. Yeah, it was nuts, dude. It was absolutely insane.
Oh gosh, if that happens again, you got to call me. I want to fly down and see one of these games.
Yeah, you might.
I want to see JD in a fight.
Oh, I will never get into a fight, but my teammates love to trash talk. Absolutely love the trash talk. At any rate, we were down 4-1, and we had a couple of goals in the third period as we mounted our comeback, where I didn't score the goal, but I had a role in how the play developed. Primarily standing in front of the net, using my big body. Look, I'm 6'1", 230. And I take up space, and I'm hard to move because I'm 230. And so like I can stand in front of the goalie, and on a power play, that's what I was doing. And the defender came to take me. So one of my, teammates came in behind and was able to do a little tap in. And there was another goal where I was just standing in front of the goal. And again, the defender's trying to move me out of the way, but the goalie can't see. And the shot comes in. He has no idea where it is. And boom, it's a goal.
Boom. Good.
And then we went on to win in overtime. So it was fun.
So so great way to celebrate Father's Day on your end.
Good way to celebrate Father's Day. We got a win.
Love that, man.
And all I could think about was Riley and her skills and how we could use her on our team. So
as long as she doesn't have an anxiety attack.
As long as she doesn't have an anxiety attack. Absolutely. It was really hilarious where I have on social media, on Twitter especially, I have my film account, the InSession Film account, and then I have my personal account, which is a little bit of sports and film. Yeah. And when I see hockey people tweeting out about Inside Out 2 in film, it's this surreal, explosion of everything that I love together.
Yeah, we're obviously not going to review Inside Out 2 on this specific episode. That'll come later on this week.
Yeah, that's coming out.
I have some burning questions for you about that movie, especially with relation to hockey. I have a lot of questions.
I want to talk about it. Absolutely, I want to talk about it because it's one of the best hockey movies ever made. Genuinely.
Like the fact that I have questions. Not necessarily about the hockey itself. I won't get into it yet, but I do have genuine questions for you.
I cannot wait to talk about that when we get into Inside Out 2. But I did see this fun tweet where one of the hockey guys that I follow, I guess he's more on the YouTube side, but anyway, he put out this prospect report. And it listed all of her attributes, like her skating and her shooting and her physicality. And it was mostly fair.
It gave her statistics on her playability and everything.
Well, it gave her grades on her playability. So like her skating was like a B and her shooting was an A, but her physicality was an F or whatever it was. And so it was like a scouting report. And I disagreed with some of it because her physicality might not be there wholly when you watch Inside Out 2 and
But she's also 14.
physicality. Well, but here's the thing. She might not be a physical player, naturally.
Mhm. Yeah.
However, we do see at one point in that film, she completely destroys.
Oh, she
one of
body
her
slams
friends.
somebody. Yeah.
She can lay a hit if need be. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying.
She's
I
capable.
can't go as far as to
capable.
give it a death.
And most hockey players are. And from what I understand, just in general, we'll of course talk about this further on that review. The hockey stuff is pretty accurately represented in that movie.
Well, that's why I want to talk about it. Why I mentioned that it's one of the better hockey movies I've seen.
I wouldn't put it past Pixar to do that kind of research, to research those little details. They've done it with their music-related films when we actually see people on screen, animated people on screen are playing the piano or they're playing guitar. And me being the musician, it's like I recognize, oh, that sounds like the note of D. They're playing the shape of a D chord. Okay, Coco gets music right. It's so like they're not strangers to getting those details right. So if this movie is accurate from a hockey standpoint, that does not surprise me.
Absolutely. I don't want to get too much into it now. Again, we'll talk about it soon, and that review will probably come out tomorrow as this episode goes live, or very soon.
Sure.
At any rate, I put out a thread on Twitter over the weekend where I kind of opened up a little bit and where that film really resonated with me. And a lot of it genuinely ties to the hockey. Like Inside Out 2, again, not to get too much into it, but it is a hockey movie. As much as it's about Riley and her emotions, it is a hockey movie. And there's one moment at the end of the film that I'll go into in glorious detail in that review where she goes out and plays at the end of the film in this pure way. And it destroyed me because it's exactly why I come on here and I talk about my playing, as I just did moments ago. Come on here, talk about my beer league, and we joke and we laugh about it.
Yeah.
But the reasons I lace up the skates each week are for the exact reasons why Riley does at the end of that film.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's incredible. And I was thinking about the film and how it connected with me, and I was going through some of the footage from the trailers that they put out. And there's one moment where you see a goalie facing Riley, and I think she actually scores on the play in the trailer anyway.
Yeah.
But you when you pause the screenshot or the trailer and you look at the goaltender and how she's going down to the butterfly, and it's beautiful. The pads are out, the blocker's up, she's square to the shooter. Whoever did the rendering of that film with hockey, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. Like the detail is incredible. And I'll go more into it when we do the review.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts from that specific lens.
It's so
on the movie
good.
as a hockey movie specifically.
Yeah. At any rate, so I'll have some good things to say about Inside Out 2, I guess. Spoiler alert there. However, speaking of Inside Out 2, Brendan, the parade is on, my friend. The parade is on. Because yes, the box office was incredible this weekend.
We knew Inside Out 2 was going to be one of the bigger moneymakers this summer as far as its opening weekend was concerned, right? But it was projecting around 90 million, I think. And what's it at? Like 155, 160 or something?
Domestically 155, 295 worldwide already.
It is right now, from what I understand, the second biggest opening weekend for an animated movie ever.
Yeah.
The second highest. I guess technically third highest if you include The Lion King from 2019. But that's just a formality. But that's okay. We have something to talk about this summer now. We have something to talk about financially.
And look, I I admit I don't know if I have crow to eat here, but maybe I do. Because a few weeks ago, Brendan posed the question, what movie's coming out this summer that we know for sure will financially hit? Yeah. The only one I said with any confidence whatsoever was Deadpool and Wolverine, which is going to be hilarious if that film does not do well.
Oh my gosh. I mean, at this point now, I wouldn't be surprised. I have no idea what's going to happen with anything.
I mean, anymore. And maybe that is the point. However, I'm still very confident in that.
Yeah, that's fair.
But that was the only movie I was for sure stamp it. That one is going to do well. The rest of these, even Inside Out 2, I wasn't sure because Pixar lately has been kind of hit or miss. And I know Inside Out did extremely well in 2015. It was one of Pixar's biggest movies in terms of financial success, especially through the 2010s. It was a critical darling. I believe it won the Oscar for Best Animated Film as well.
Another one that was also nominated for a Screenplay Award, if I'm not mistaken, too.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very well received. Yeah. I, of course, love the film. It was my favorite film of 2015. And even with all of that success in a post-pandemic world where Pixar has struggled to reach those same heights, you know, Luca, we've talked about it. Luca did very well streaming-wise, for sure.
It did. Who's to say that what would have happened if that came out pre-COVID?
Yeah, but in terms of box office success in a post-COVID world, we just haven't seen them, you know, at the same, you know, the same trajectories that we saw, you know, prior to the pandemic. So I wasn't sure. I was honestly a little dubious.
I'm glad they have a hit on their hands.
So for Inside Out 2 to be this massive of a movie just brings tears to my eyes, and it makes me smile. Like I'm very excited
I'm happy for Pixar. I'm happy for Pixar after what they had to deal with, and of course I mean, no studio had it easy when COVID happened. Like Pixar just. They had to make choices with upcoming content as far as how they were going to release it, and they relied on Disney Plus. And maybe there was a miscalculation and an over-reliance on that for a time that triggered audiences into thinking they didn't have to see Pixar movies in a theater anymore. And that's ultimately what happened when, you know, a movie like Elemental came out, for instance, and then Lightyear being its own sort of confusing thing. I think the marketing really failed that movie more than anything else. And then the quality of the film just didn't give it any word of mouth to carry it forward anyway. Inside Out 2 is finally breaking this trend, and I would love to see what happens next with Pixar when they do something else, whether it be another sequel or another piece of original material. I think their next film is this original film called Elio, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know when it comes out. It's probably next year or something by this point, or maybe it could be Toy Story 5. I don't even know what's coming out next. But I'm happy that Pixar finally has a win because I know they've been struggling. This is one of the few times we've actually started to see Pixar as a company include layoffs within their business plan. We haven't really seen that be because I think they laid off about 100 or so people not too long ago, and that's very much against the norm of what we've seen Pixar as a business. They were sort of known as this creative force that got things done. There's even a book about their business, right? It's called Creativity Incorporated. And it talks about how their creativity is what spawned success. It's such a rarity. So hopefully this pushes them back into a realm of familiarity with how they ran their business. And I'm hoping it does.
Yes. And I think that you're right. We're getting back to where people used to respond to Pixar. Now, I'm curious if that continues to grow. I do want to put it into perspective in the sense that, look, we're still only a few years removed from the pandemic and really getting out to the theaters.
It's still pretty fresh.
You know, when Lightyear came out, that was 2022. We were just kind of on the verge of getting out. Now that film, Lightyear, was extremely mismarketed. Yeah. And the quality wasn't there comparatively to what you're used to. And that's probably why the word of mouth wasn't great. And to put it into context, again, 2022 to 24, it is different. It is. But still, that film worldwide only grossed $226 million.
That is
so.
That
Inside
is
Out 2
it's
has
already beaten
that.
Okay, that is honestly the funniest thing I think I've heard all year as far as movie news is concerned. That is downright hilarious.
Yeah, it's very funny. And Elemental, a film that I do like, and we talked to death about it, it grossed 154 domestically and 496 worldwide. So domestically speaking, it's already beat Elemental. Inside Out 2 has. Yeah. Now worldwide, it still has a ways to go, but it's going to get there. It's probably not going to take long for Inside Out 2.
I think it's going to take a few weeks,
Elemental.
maybe if that. Might even take 1 week.
Like Elemental, it took some time. Like it was in theaters
for a few months,
like 2 months.
Right? Yeah,
like 2 months, and eventually it picked up steam. And I'm glad that it ended up doing well. So it didn't quite have. It wasn't the same tragedy that Lightyear was.
Right.
However, Inside Out 2 very much screams Pixar is back. They are so back. And
now they just need to hold it. They just need to
hold it.
Yeah.
And now it's also a sequel to, again, a beloved movie that was financially very successful. So the question remains, is this Pixar getting back to form, or is this an outlier? We don't know. And you're right about Elio. I believe that's the next film coming up. Maybe like how that film does, we'll answer that a little bit before we get to Toy Story 5 that is coming out in June of 2026.
Right.
So that's a few years removed still. And maybe we can get into the Toy Story 5 news, because they did announce that Andrew Stanton is coming back to direct Toy Story 5. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have very mixed feelings on this.
Okay.
And here, my first instinct when I heard this news was, oh, thank God. Wall-E, Finding Nemo, and Finding Dory, whatever. But at least we have someone that has been in the Pixar DNA since its inception, right?
Yes.
At least since Toy Story, right? He didn't direct Toy Story, but Andrew Stanton was a key screenwriter and producer on those films. So this is someone that knows Pixar. That got me excited. But if you remember, I referenced this book that talked about it talked about the business model of Pixar called creativity, and it talks about these things called ugly babies versus the hungry beast. And part of this whole point was using this analogy that every time you come up with a new idea, it's this ugly baby. It's not there yet. We need time for it to grow to become something beautiful, rather than let the hungry beast just eat it up and let the usual thing that makes money just keep churning you out, right? Yeah. And I feel like this news of Andrew Stanton coming in to direct Toy Story 5, it got me excited at first, but now I'm starting to realize it might just be an overly safe pick. And that's the thing that kind of worries me, because I feel like it's representative of what we saw Pixar say, what Pete Docter may have been quoted in saying just a few weeks ago about the shifting of this business model to focus on things that they think are going to make money and be successes for them, and not do these quote unquote autobiographical directors projects. Right. So Luca, Turning Red, falling into that category. Yeah. So I fear the hiring of Andrew Stanton, the familiarity of him, I think is a great parallel to this narrative of what Pixar is doing, and that scares me. So it's kind of twofold. I think he's a good filmmaker. I think in that way, Toy Story 5 is probably in decent hands. I don't think it'll be a terrible film in that regard then, but it also makes me worried about the overall mission of Pixar nowadays, given what they were just talking about a few weeks ago. So that's where I'm torn on this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little torn on this too, in the sense that I don't know if we need a Toy Story 5. I felt the same way.
We don't. We didn't even need Toy Story 4.
I very much felt that way.
I'm liking that film less as time goes on. I have to admit.
think the idea of Toy Story 5, even if you remove Stanton, I think is extremely applicable to what you're saying there.
Yeah.
It is a safe choice that will give Pixar a financial, at the very least, win.
Yeah.
That will help them in whatever strains they're feeling from some of these other projects that are a result of the pandemic. And was it on last week's show we talked about this so-called new direction that Pixar is taking?
I think it was 2 weeks ago, but it was
2 weeks ago?
it was still sometime this month, maybe late May. It may have been, but it was very recently. We talked about this new, I guess, business agenda that Pixar is focusing on.
Either last week or the week before.
Yeah.
And to reiterate, in case you missed that episode, I think it's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. The reasons they pointed to as to why they're making the shift are obtuse at best. It's absolutely asinine. And so picking Toy Story 4, coming off the heels of Inside Out 2, feels like a safe bet.
Yeah.
People love these films. So, okay, you're going to do a Toy Story 5. Well, who can we get to do that film? And I think that's where Andrew Stanton is interesting to me, because I didn't love Toy Story 4.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think it's because of Josh Cooley and what he brought to the franchise in that fourth film. It was less so him, although Stanton was a credited screenwriter, so he was still heavily involved.
He was still part of
that
it.
film.
He was still part of it.
Still a part of it. However, that film felt, for as vibrant as it was at times, as inspired as it was with some of the character choices, I also felt like it was stale, and it regurgitated a lot of what we've already seen with Toy Story 4.
It was very inconsequential.
With Toy Story 5, with Stanton coming back to the director's chair, not just coming in as a writer, I kind of wonder if that will reinvigorate this franchise. Will it bring something new to the table that we haven't already done that will make sense of greenlighting that movie? That's where I'm most intrigued. And when you look at Stanton's filmography, it is hard to look at it and go, nope, he's not gonna help this at all. Now, I say that to say I think Finding Dory is maybe the worst Pixar film. It is extremely
I don't think it's that bad, but it's not great. It's not great.
It's not great. I would go as far as to say it's the worst one.
I had a good experience.
Maybe Cars 2 was worse.
Yeah, I had a good experience in the theater with Finding Dory that sort of saved it for me, but I'm not sure if it was the movie doing the work or the experience of me watching it in that particular setting. But I mean, Finding Nemo especially and WALL-E, those are some people. If someone had those as their top two favorite Pixar films, I could understand that, right? So Andrew Stanton is a creative force. He really is.
Yeah, I will say this. Finding Dory is the only Pixar film, the only one I've seen where I kind of wanted to walk out. I didn't even want to finish it.
I
think it's that bad.
It's tedious. It's a very tedious movie.
Yeah. I just, even more so than Lightyear. Lightyear, I like, because that's a film that's kind of getting a reappraisal in some ways. And I've seen.
Okay, if it does, fine. If it does, I can't control that. I don't think I'll join the club because
I won't either. But there was a lot of conversation over the weekend because people were asking, "What are your Pixar hot takes?" And you saw a lot of, "Well, Lightyear actually isn't that bad. It's refreshing. It's different. It's not at all what you would expect from the Toy Story franchise." And if you're one of those people that feels the same and you love it, it's so different than what you expected, I admire you, and I wish that I could join you in that. I feel like that is it's a little bit of a banal experience, but also I think it is extremely misguided. Like the whole premise of that film is predicated on you leaning into the nostalgia. Like as much as we criticize films and franchises for overdoing nostalgia, you have a built-in excuse.
I mean, that's
lean into it.
That movie was clearly something else that got retroactively changed to be a Toy Story tie-in. And you know, like I know a lot of people have said like they like the movie because it breaks away from Toy Story to be its own thing. My problem with the movie is it doesn't do that enough. In fact, like that opening blurb that says this was Andy's favorite movie, like that is a small part of the movie, but it's also the biggest part of why the movie doesn't work. Like,
well, I agree.
Yeah, you remove that blurb, it actually kind of really improves the movie.
Well, and that's the thing. Do you want to make a Lightyear movie or do you want to tie it into Toy Story? Because you can't have it both ways. If you want the film to move away from Toy Story and be its own thing, and to what you just said, do that even more, that's fine. If you remove the context that we see at the beginning of the film. But given that this is supposed to be the film that Andy saw, you need to lean into that nostalgia. You got to give us the Buzz Lightyear that we know from those Toy Story films, because that's why Andy bought him.
Or you have to give us a 90s themed movie that a kid in the 1990s would love.
Yeah.
And that's not what that movie was.
All of the lore and everything we know about Buzz Lightyear from the Toy Story movies that Andy would know, that Andy loved about Buzz, is not in Lightyear. It's not there. It just it makes no sense whatsoever. And I think that's partially why people were disappointed. Certainly why I did not like it at all.
You talked about Finding Dory probably being your least favorite Pixar film. I think the more I think about it, it might be Lightyear for me. I've often said Cars 3 it is, but Lightyear is like that. The misguidedness of that movie is just so frustrating.
I will say I am more frustrated with Lightyear. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. And I think that's because I liked the idea. It just isn't there in execution. And
the potential squandered.
It's squandered big time. I agree. So like I do think it is a better movie than Finding Dory, but honestly, it might be one that I dislike more because of those frustrations.
Like I said,
I can't come around on the reappraisal. I'm sorry, I can't.
I'm with you. There are a few Pixar films that, again, I hate focusing on negativity because Pixar has made some of the greatest movies of all time, animation or not. But there are a few Pixar films that I have felt like I've been liking less as time has gone on. One of them is Lightyear, and the other one is Toy Story 4. And like Toy Story 4, I think opens up wonderfully. I think the first 30 minutes are great. I think where it goes, it feels very inconsequential, like we were talking about. And that's the thing that scares me the most about the mere existence of Toy Story 5, like we're talking about. And the fact that Andrew Stanton's coming back to it, you know, it does pose this question. Is it a creative decision or is it a business decision? And it's going to be one or the other. It's going to prove the existence of this film, Toy Story 5 specifically, as something that needed to happen, or it's going to feel like Toy Story 4 for me again. And I know Toy Story 4 has its defenders. I get it. There are good qualities in that movie and some bold messages and some existential dread with Forky, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
But if the movie Toy Story 5 falls into that category again for me, I'm going to sense Andrew Stanton's involvement as a business move. And right now I'm not sure if I trust it.
And that's the thing. Yeah, like I don't know if it's going to be Andrew Stanton, the artist who gave us Finding Nemo and Wall-E.
Yeah.
Or is it going to be, hey, we need a safe choice to direct this film because we want to get back to quote unquote universal nonsense. Like that's
but here's and you know, we've seen evidence of it going both ways with their sequels as of late, right? We're talking about Finding Dory and Toy Story 4, which you and I are at the very best mixed on, right? Even though we recognize, at least with Toy Story 4, it's an okay movie with some good qualities in it. But the other end of that spectrum is Incredibles 2. That movie's really good. Like, that's a really good sequel.
I agree.
But then again, Brad Bird is maybe twice the filmmaker than any of these people, so it might not be the best comparison.
Exactly. So I don't. I don't know what to think of Toy Story 5 at the moment. I really would like to see some footage before I give a strong opinion one way or another. Because I don't know the motive here. It could be incredibly inspired that reinvigorates that franchise and gives it purpose again. I could totally see that happening. And honestly, Finding Dory aside, I don't know if I have a reason to doubt Andrew Stanton.
Yeah.
But when you couple it with recent announcements and just the idea of Toy Story, like going back to that well over and over and over again, it's hard to be a little cynical, like not to be cynical about it at the same time.
Yeah,
So
I
just don't
think
know.
if it weren't for those announcements just a few weeks ago, I think I would be more excited for Andrew Stanton coming in. But now there's another narrative that's clouding it for me, and that's the thing.
No, yeah, I'm with you. The whole idea of Pixar hot takes I thought was interesting because when considering it, I honestly I don't know if I have too much that's fiery that I would consider fiery.
I thought about it. Yeah.
The only thing that might come close, well, and I don't think this is the case either. But maybe it has a little bit of, maybe it's a little warm because when you consider early Pixar with Toy Story and Toy Story 2 and Ratatouille and Finding Nemo and that whole run through the 2000s, and people most of the time going to that well as these are the best Pixar movies. Since 2015, I have stood extremely firm that Inside Out is the best Pixar film I've seen, and I still maintain that is the case.
I don't think that's that hot takey.
Well, that's the thing. Like, and that's why I look at it and go, okay, like, is it really? That's why for me, if anything, I might consider it lukewarm, but I don't have anything that is truly fiery because you're right. Like, I don't think it's a crazy take to say that Inside Out is the best film.
I'd say your best or your biggest, most fiery take on Pixar is that you quite like Elemental. Maybe that's your hottest take in a way, because you're a bigger defender of that film. Yeah. There you go. There you go. And to be like, I didn't like Elemental as much as you did, but I think that one had potential to be even better. I thought there was a great story somewhere in there.
I don't know if I wouldn't go as far as to say Elemental's in my top 5. I don't even know if it's in my top 10. I do like it. I'm against the grain on it for sure. I can at least go that far. So, well, again, the hotness of the take is where I don't know. Similarly with our thoughts on Luca, like you and I both consider Luca to be top 5. I know people really like it. Like the general consensus is it's good. It
has some defenders. It has some really great defenders. I mean, maybe one of my hottest takes is that I think Enrico Casarosa, who directed Luca, is probably their best filmmaker working there now, because he also directed a Pixar short film called La Luna that I actually think is their best short film as well. So I want to see more from him. So maybe that could be a bit hot takey in a way. Maybe it's also that I think Turning Red might be in my top 10 for Pixar. I really like that film quite a bit.
Yeah, I could see that being a little hot take.
Okay. I know what my hot take. I'm looking at my ranking for Pixar right now. Here's my hot take. The first 10 minutes of Up are the worst part.
Yeah, I do actually. Now that you say that,
I remember I did tweet that. I totally forgot about it.
Tweeting that out. Yeah.
Let me rephrase it. It's not that I think it's the quote unquote worst part. The opening 10 minutes are amazing. It's a great short film. But I think what happens afterwards is actually the best stuff in the movie. Okay. The talking dogs, curiously misunderstood creatures are, to quote Hagrid there. I love the talking dogs and I love the dog fighting. I don't care.
And the funny thing about that is Hagrid would say that about
he
that
would.
movie.
He would. Up, the thing I love about Up is that it was not afraid to get ridiculous. And some people don't like the ridiculousness of that. And I totally get it. It's all a matter of taste. But I love that about the film. And I love that it commits to that and still somehow balances a human story within that. That's great tone management.
agree and disagree with you. I am with the consensus that the opening 10 minutes is the best sequence in the film. However, where I do depart from a lot of people, I'm with you. I think what follows is spectacular. I think it's also quite great. And that's why it's a wonderful film. I don't have my ranking pulled up in front of me. I'd have to pull it up, but it's certainly in my top 10, maybe even my top 5. I love it as well.
It's my number 3. Interestingly, my top 3 all came out back to back. It's Ratatouille, WALL-E, and Up. And that was 2007, 2008, and 2009, respectively. That's weirdly my top 3 right now.
And I look, I've seen that more often than a list that includes Inside Out, which is why I go back to that film being maybe a little warm. Because it's not even just that it's great or that it's top 5 or top 10. I have it as number 1. I don't know many others that do. Maybe I'm
I don't
wrong,
know. Yeah,
but
I don't know.
Haven't seen it. I haven't seen that.
I mean, I'm high on it as well. Right now, I have it at number 6. So it's just outside my top 10. For a while, it was in my top 10 until Luca came around. And I actually gave Toy Story 3 a rewatch, and that one even rose up for me. Because for the longest time, Toy Story 2 was my favorite of the Toy Story films. But I don't know. There's something about the way that Toy Story 3 treats the inevitability of what Toy Story 2 sets up that I actually found more profound as I got older. Like, Toy Story 3 does not really take many narrative risks. Toy Story 2 tells you how Toy Story 3 is going to end. But there's something about seeing it actually happen that, like, makes it all the more moving, because as a child, you don't really understand those things that you're told until you actually experience them firsthand. And I think that's what makes Toy Story 3 more interesting as you get older. It is like literally the audience coming of age watching those movies together. And I found it more profound as I, gave it a rewatch not too long ago.
Well, okay. So similarly, maybe I'll have a Brendan moment here, because now that I'm looking at my list, so I still maintain I'm probably higher on Inside Out than most.
Sure.
I have it as one of the best films of last decade.
Yeah.
I don't know many people that have it that high.
Right.
So I think that's where I do distinguish myself from others. Like, I remember watching that film with you.
I remember watching you watching that film. I think we saw it in 3D, and your glasses were soaked.
It was a profound experience. I mean, we laugh and we joke about it, but it truly was a life-changing experience, especially given that time and how, like, the early 2010s were extremely rough for me. And coming out on the other side of that and excuse me, and getting married in 2014, and then watching that film and experiencing what it had to offer in terms of our emotions and the connectiveness, and how it helps inform our personality islands and everything we go through as a child. And then you throw in the whole hockey element of it all, which is so personal to me
you're kind
that it just took my breath away.
If Riley was a musician, I would probably call Inside Out the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah, it was fair enough. So I'm really high on it, but if it's not that, then maybe it is Toy Story 2. Because I would rank that, of the original 3, I would rank that third on the list. Like, I remember you said that. The first and the third film to Toy Story.
Right.
Now,
but Toy Story 3 is your favorite of the 3, though, right?
Yeah, Toy Story 3 I am slightly higher on than 1. However, also, let me be clear on this. All 3 of them are spectacular.
They're
it's
great.
One of the best trilogies ever made. So I even as I say this, it's not as if I'm like, Toy Story 2, get that trash out of here. Like, it's not that at all. Like, you're basically not even close to that.
In your case, what you're talking about is 2 5-star movies with a 4.5-star middle ground.
Yeah, like kind of in that range for sure. Yeah. And I would even go as far as to say that Toy Story 2 has some of the highest highs of the whole franchise for sure. But I also think it has some of the lowest lows for me. Like, there are some elements of it that I just don't love. So it still equals out to 4 or 4.5, whatever it is.
Sure.
I just, I like it less than the other three.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like when you ask people their rankings, I would say more time than not, Toy Story 2 is up at the top most of the time.
I think maybe Toy Story 3 is the most common favorite, but Toy Story 2, I think, does battle it out maybe more often than, let's say, your perspective on the film might. So maybe that might be a little against the grain there. And for full disclosure, I would put Toy Story 3 as my favorite now after that recent rewatch I gave it.
Okay.
But before that, it was Toy Story 2 that was my favorite because I always saw it as the necessary backbone that made Toy Story 3 work. But now, as I've gotten older, there's something about Toy Story 3 playing with the inevitability and the obviousness of its narrative that actually weirdly makes it more profound. Like it's actually like something that I think we all experience in life, that we're told we're going to have to say goodbye to certain things when we're young, but we don't understand that until we actually have to do it. And Toy Story 3 is about that time in our lives when we actually have to say goodbye. And it taps into that idea really well, and that's why that's why I've elevated in my list.
I completely agree. That's why that film is so incredibly vibrant and thematically potent, and why I just was
in any other trilogy,
Toy Story film.
Well, see, that's the thing. In any other trilogy that may have been about other things, Toy Story 3 or the third installment, in a general sense, could have suffered because the second installment kind of tells you how this trilogy is going to end. And somehow knowing that makes Toy Story 3 all the more powerful for me now. Like I love that idea on its face.
I agree. And I know we've talked about it on this show before, but the visualization of the third film ending on the exact same frame that the first one begins with.
That's why Toy Story 4 doesn't exist.
It just doesn't get more poetic and beautiful than that. George Lucas would be so proud. And
full circle, baby.
Like, you just didn't need to go back to the well. Like, I'm glad people love Toy Story 4, and I still enjoyed the film. Don't get me wrong.
It's not bad. Forky's a great character.
It has some great things in it that you just can't love. What was the character? Duke Kaboom? Loved him. Like,
I like Duke Kaboom. Ducky and Bunny. I like Key and Peele, but sometimes their humor can go a long way. At least in like an animated sense, it sometimes worked for me. The dumbing down of Buzz Lightyear, I think, is one of the most egregiously bad things that Pixar may have ever done, period. Just makes no sense for the character. So it does some great things, but then also some absolutely bad things. It just kind of has it all.
And honestly, its biggest sin is that it just regurgitates everything that came before it. Like, in terms of its ideas and themes, it doesn't really expand on anything. It's a lot of what came before. And it's really hard to, I'm not saying you can, that there isn't something there. That's why I'm curious if Andrew Stanton can do something more as a director. But he also did help write Toy Story 4, which is in contrast to that whole idea. So, like, I don't even know if I can trust him.
I know that's where
Andrew Stanton, the writer, is also stuck. So I don't know.
That's where I'm battling it. That's where I'm battling it myself. I know it's semantics. We talked about with Lightyear. If you remove that opening blurb about Andy's relationship to this movie we're about to see, the movie significantly improves. Like, it's weird to say that, but that opening blurb, you take that out of Lightyear, it's a better movie, I think.
I agree.
Yeah. Toy Story 4, I think, is a better movie if you don't call it Toy Story 4. If you called it like Woody's Last Roundup or something like that. Because the movie, but seriously, because the movie feels like an epilogue to the Toy Story franchise.
Yeah, sure. That's fair.
And I think if you see it in that way, sometimes a title actually has like an emotional connection to the movie itself and serves a purpose and helps the movie. And I think by calling that movie Toy Story 4, it actually hurts the movie in a weird way. And I get why you have to do that. That's how it's going to sell. But I don't think it does the narrative any favors.
Well, and maybe that's where Pixar, and they have time to do this. They're not going to do this because they want to lean on Toy Story as
they're going to call it
IP.
Toy Story 5. We know that.
But maybe you do call it Woody Brings the Gang Back Together.
something like that.
That could change people's perspective on it for sure.
Yeah.
either way, I mean, I guess we'll see how it plays out. But
yeah.
I mean, looking at my list here, I don't have too many hot takes. Maybe my biggest hot take is we don't need a Toy Story 5, and Andrew Stanton is better served doing something else.
Yeah, I think aside, I think aside from what we talked about, I don't have many other hot takes. My I mean, Ratatouille, I think, is one of the greatest movies ever made. That's my favorite one. So, but that's not a hot take. I think a lot of people would agree with that. I think that's a perfect movie.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I can think of here is that I didn't dislike The Good Dinosaur. I recognize, I can see
it's not the worst.
But
it's not the worst. It's not a good movie, but I think it has some ambitious qualities that I can't say about movies like Onward or Lightyear or Cars 2 or 3. I mean, I think Finding Dory is a better movie than The Good Dinosaur, but I think The Good Dinosaur is more ambitious. So it gets more points in different ways. It's I don't know. I think it has some ambitious things. I'm not totally disagreeing with you on The Good Dinosaur.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I liked it. I despite its issues, I very much do enjoy it. And circling back to our previous conversation, because I do have my list up here, my bottom three are the aforementioned Lightyear, Dory, and Cars 2. But I do have Cars 2 as the worst. So I do have Finding Dory above it. So to contradict myself from earlier,
well,
that's the list I have here.
I mean, Cars 2 is such a bad movie. Cars 3 is my least favorite. Then with Lightyear and Cars 2 kind of battling out my bottom three in whatever way I feel like is fit at the time. I will give Cars 2 a little bit of credit for at least trying to be different. It just fails at it, which is why I might put it above Cars 3. A movie I want to love more than I do is Monsters University, because I love the idea of its ending and what it's suggesting thematically. I just think the execution is not there. I think the movie that should have been is the journey of Mike and Sully in the mailroom working their way up through hard work. I think that's the movie. And they save it for a montage at the end. I think that's really unfortunate.
That's fair. You know, circling back to Cars 3 real fast, I obviously like the film much more than you.
I can't stand that movie.
Our review from 2017 is one of the more interesting that we've done over the years, because it feels like the most random film that you and I went toe to toe on. And it was a little bit of a drag out fight. Surprisingly.
It was. Well, didn't we couple that? So this was back when we were doing extra film together, and we would usually have 2 film reviews in one episode, one extra film episode. And didn't we couple that with the movie Lady Macbeth with Florence Pugh?
Was it?
Which was
that would be hilarious if that is true. I don't know.
If that is true, then that's probably the only episode of InSession Film ever where you and I don't agree on anything.
On anything. I'd have to look that up, but that is absolutely hilarious. Well, and the other thing too with Cars 3 that I always think about is that you and I had a guest appearance on First Time Watchers as they were ending their show. Was that last year? I can't remember. 2 years ago?
Last year, 2 years ago. I think it was something.
Was that last year? Like, it was like maybe around this time last year, because it wasn't around the summertime that they ended that. I can't recall.
Yeah, so it was maybe a year ago, I think. But anyway, I just looked it up. Extra film, Cars 3 / Lady Macbeth.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. That is absolutely hilarious. So yeah, you and I very much went at each other's throats on that.
That was fun. That was fun. Doesn't happen very often.
Does not happen very often. All right. Well, I did not anticipate us going this long on Pixar and animation.
Yeah.
So
it's a great discussion. We have a new segment to launch about Pixar right now, but I went with you. I did not expect the news of Toy Story 5 to lead to a full-on discussion on Pixar and hot takes and rankings and all. I know,
and here we are. Yeah. That's the joy of the show. Joy being one of my favorite characters in Pixar's canon, so that is appropriate. We are, of course, going to continue our Best Picture movie series here in just a second.
Yeah.
Before we do, quickly, I at least want to mention one other thing, and that's the news that we saw earlier in the week that Sony has bought Alamo Drafthouse. I think that's worth bringing up here.
It is
What
worth
are
acknowledging.
your thoughts on that?
I think it's really interesting because this could potentially be a huge shakeup in the movie industry, especially with regard to movie theater attendance and movie going in general. And this is kind of new because, from what I understand, and for those listening, if there are any experts on the legalities of this, please correct me if I'm wrong. But
Yeah.
I believe because I believe from the years of 1948 through 2020. This was something that was very prohibited. This kind of purchase, a production company purchasing a theater chain, right? I think it was the Paramount Decrees they were called or something like that. The U.S. Department of Justice made this something you couldn't do. In 1948, pre-1948, this is something that I think Hollywood studios would sometimes do to, work with theaters on certain marketing things. I don't really know everything about that. But this is a pretty major shakeup if we're seeing a chain like Sony, not a chain, but a company like Sony buying a full theater chain as opposed to like maybe a theater here and there like we've sometimes seen before.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting. I'm really curious to see what it brings and what Sony plans on doing with the Alamo Drafthouse. I think it's great that they're doing that because I know it was 2021 maybe when the Alamo Drafthouse filed for bankruptcy. I forget what range it was, maybe Chapter 11 bankruptcy or something like that. So this is great for their business if they're going to have some support in that way. What does that mean for content? What does that mean for like Sony properties themselves? Like this could be maybe their case of trying to offer specific exclusive rights to Sony property only at Alamo Drafthouses. Does this then mean that other studios are going to start trying to buy AMCs and Regals and do similar things? And how does that distribute profit and revenue between movies that play in those theaters that then go to other studio owners? Like, it's potentially messy from an economic standpoint, but this could potentially change the entire landscape of the movie-going experience. I don't know if it's going to be for better or for worse yet. I don't know. But if the intent is to boost attendance at theaters, maybe we can look at it as a good thing at this point right now. But it is a really interesting update.
Well, it is a very interesting update. I, again, want to know what the motive is here. And we'll probably never find that out. Maybe we will.
Maybe.
If this goes well. But I am curious what the goal is here because Alamo Drafthouse is certainly a household name to many of us. But they aren't everywhere. For example, here in Florida, we don't have one. So is the idea here is that Sony, because they're invested in the theatrical experience, not only are they buying Alamo, but plan to build more of them? Is that the idea? And if so, you're right. The next question would be, what is the economics of this as it relates to other studios?
Yeah.
Are they going to negotiate something that is different than the conventional norm, whatever that may be?
Yeah.
Is this a ploy to stronghold the other studios in some way?
Yeah.
Not
Does this mean that
Alamo
Alamo Drafthouses are only going to be playing Sony properties now?
Exactly. But again, at this point, unless I'm wrong here, there's not nearly as many Alamo Drafthouses as there are other chains.
Right.
There's
true.
Regals, AMC, Cinemarks are everywhere. I cannot go to an Alamo unless I want to fly to Texas.
Right.
That's probably the closest one to me. So at the same time, we raise those concerns, but how much is this really going to influence the industry unless they build a lot more of them? And again, maybe that's the idea. I don't know.
I don't know.
But until that comes to fruition, if they're able to get into the market in the same way that an AMC and a Regal is, then I think those concerns are much more prominent.
Yeah.
And we need to start asking those questions. But until then, I don't know how much influence it'll really have. Even if Sony goes full out evil, like cartoon evil on this. How many Alamos are there? There's not many comparatively.
Well, maybe
I don't think they can really influence the market all that much.
Well, maybe that's why they chose Alamo Drafthouse, because it's small potatoes as a way to test their strategy.
Exactly. And
yeah. So you're right that the motive and what we find out from their overall business goals here, that's going to be a deciding factor as to whether this is good or not. And if we sound like we're hesitant, it's mostly because we just don't know. This could be great news. This could mean like the theater going experience changes in a way that allows other studios to participate with other chains, that they offer their own exclusives with their own content that make movie going more of an event now and more of something that people want to participate in. Like if that's what we end up getting in like maybe 10 years or something like that, we can look back on this news as a positive domino effect. I think there is potential for this move. I just don't know if it's going to be that good yet.
Yeah. I mean, and it's also interesting because Alamo is revered for its unique experience. These days, no one really says that about Sony movies. So that contrast, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah.
And funny. I guess.
I wonder if, what's that streaming service that's owned by Sony? Is it Crunchyroll? I think it is, which I think specializes in anime content. I don't know if that's going to have a play here in some way. There's probably other ways Sony can, play with their content strategy specifically. But you're right. When it comes to other Sony properties, especially in correlation with Marvel, not always the most positive, right? Especially if a movie like Morbius is involved. So, or Madam Web, that's probably a better example. There has to be a game here. There has to be some type of goal here.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and I'm not really too privy to these details because I didn't really look them up beforehand, and I don't really recall the details. But Sony recently tried to buy Paramount, if I'm not mistaken.
They did.
And that did not go through for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So then they scoop up Alamo Drafthouse. I don't know. I assume those things are kind of related in some way, shape, or form. Maybe Sony is just simply trying to expand their portfolio in some way. I don't know. Maybe that's all this is.
Now it just sounds like they're trying to monopolize, which is a scary thing.
And that's where you go to the cartoon villain of all of this.
Yeah.
They're trying to scoop up Paramount. Okay, that doesn't work. We'll start with the Alamo Drafthouse chain and then kind of go from there. Maybe this is just step one into them taking over the world. I don't know.
Years,
but that's where you do kind of get a little dubious.
50 years. We don't even call it movies anymore. It's like, I'm going to the theaters to see a Sony.
God, that is all kinds of scary.
The hairs in the back of my neck just stood up as I said that out loud.
All right, Brennan, let's talk about coffee. It's a drink that I love. I need it every single day. If you want to change your life, you need to switch your coffee routine.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, change your life in the most profound of ways, because when you drink great coffee, you can't ever go back.
It changes you. It changes you.
Could it lead to a coffee addiction? Who knows?
Maybe.
We'll see.
Maybe.
But, that's an addiction that I'm okay to live with. If I'm being honest, I love myself some great coffee because it's the best. It's not just the caffeine of it all. It's the culture that comes with it. It's how it makes me feel. I just love drinking a good coffee, and I want to drink a good coffee. I don't want bad coffee that's bitter, where I have to put in milk and sugar and a bunch of crap that I don't want in it.
Yeah, shouldn't you be excited to drink coffee? It's like a treat. Yeah. It's like a reward.
Exactly.
And of course, part of that reward is that it's got to taste good. It's got to taste right.
Taste good. Yep. That's why we love Coffee Cult, because they source specialty grade coffee from all over the world. And this is coffee that it is the top 2% coffees in the world. Like it is high-end gourmet specialty coffee. Yeah. And you really do taste the difference. Like I didn't watch it, but I saw a YouTube video this last week, and the thumbnail was like, "Can you really taste the difference between average coffee and great coffee?" And the answer is yes, you absolutely can.
I love the voice you put on that,
Thank
like
you.
a glorified meathead.
I appreciate it. Look, I'm not trying to make fun of anyone specifically, but yeah, I mean, you can taste the difference. And that's what's great about drinking Ethiopian Harar coffee or Sumatra coffee. Like everything that Coffee Cult has to offer, they have a brand new Sidra Bourbon coffee that is extremely fruit forward. If you like high end notes of like strawberries and blueberries and citrus fruit, like it's an incredible coffee that you have to try. So go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. Use our code ISF and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, that code is ISF, 15% off, coffeecult.com, and we thank them for their support. All right, Brennan, let's talk about the InSession Film Store because we have some awesome stuff up there that we want you to go and check out.
I love it. I love it.
We have a brand new t-shirt. I wore it last week on the show, so people our YouTube viewers got a chance to see it. Our audio listeners, you need to go to the website or check out last week's show on YouTube. But we have a brand new t-shirt for those that liked The Fall Guy. Maybe you'll be into this. It just says, "Nihilism is sexy bacon," one of the best lines from The Fall Guy. We have a new shirt with that.
If that film starts to take off on streaming and VOD, I would like to claim us as the reason for that for this shirt. So hopefully we push it to success.
Maybe exactly.
Yeah.
So please go and check that out. We have shirts that are related to the Oscars. Speaking of, because of course we have Stop Turning Art into Sports. We have the Moonlight La La Land shirt. However, this week we have, as of this week, we have Chasing the Gold merch as well.
Yeah, exciting.
So for those that love Chasing the Gold, we have a brand new Chasing the Gold merch up on the store as well that you can see at InSessionFilm.com/store or simply go to tpublic.com/stores/InSessionFilm. That's where you can see all of our great stuff there. And, we're always trying to think of new stuff. So if you have a suggestion, let us know. We would love to get more stuff up there. So, but yeah, go and check out the store. It really helps us out. It's a great way to support us while looking good, whether it be shirts or mugs or whatever you buy on there.
InSession swag, baby.
Yeah, just enhancing your life and helping us out. We really do appreciate it. So go get your Nihilism is Sexy Bacon shirts, your Stop Turning Art into Sport shirts, or your Arrival shirts, whatever you want to get up there. And we thank you for your support. All right. With that said, let's go ahead and transition to our Best Picture movie series. We are currently going through the 1940s, and then we'll take some sort of a break, and we'll circle back with a different decade in some time, whatever that looks like. I don't really know at the current moment, but as it stands, we're going through the 40s, and we only have 3 more films left to do, including this week's review, which is Elia Kazan's Gentleman's Agreement from 1947, which was a first-time watch for me.
Same here.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask you as well. I do believe we noted that on last week's show, but I wanted to ask once again. So this was a first-time watch for the both of us. I'm curious to dig into this film. Brennan, anything else you want to lay out here before we jump in?
I guess for listeners, maybe if you're familiar with what we had to say about other films in this series, especially early on, I think you might notice some parallels in our thoughts, at least from me on certain things. At least, like, given the trajectory of this movie series and how it relates to America's relationship with World War II specifically. This movie has a place. Like, this movie fits that narrative. It makes sense as to why this won Best Picture.
Yeah.
Yet I think there are other things we might say. I don't know how you feel about this film, Jenny. I'm actually really interested on this. But given my thoughts, I feel like I may be saying some of the same things I said about previous movies in this series.
Okay.
I think this could end up being one of our most repetitive reviews if you've listened to every review in this series thus far. I'll at least say that given my thoughts on it.
Okay, no, I am real curious for this. I am excited to see how this goes because, as we noted with our conversation on Evil Does Not Exist, for those that might have checked out that conversation, I'm approaching this very similarly in the sense that I have a few notes here. I don't have many, partially because we're doing this on Father's Day, and it was a very busy day for me. So I didn't have too much time to formulate a lot of notes, although I probably should have. I wish that I had more time because this is a film that is going to spark debate for sure, especially given the times that we're in now. But I wanted to see where this goes. I think this is going to be a conversation where, at least for me, my thoughts on it evolve in a real-time sense as we go here. So I'm excited to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm really curious.
So let's jump in. Gentleman's Agreement, directed by Elia Kazan, and it stars Gregory Peck, Dorothy McGuire, John Garfield, Celeste Holm, Anne Revere, and many more that come and go throughout the film. If you're not familiar with Gentleman's Agreement, it is about a reporter who pretends to be Jewish in order to cover a story on anti-Semitism and personally discovers the true depths of bigotry and hatred. As we jump in here as well, while I haven't seen the film until this week, there might be certain aspects to the film and the making of this film that people are familiar with. Every week, it seems as if Brendan is ready to go with some trivia surrounding these movies we're talking about. And if you read some of the background on this film and how it came about, it is really compelling. And it does speak to some of the passion and convictions of this film for sure. So with all of that laid out, Brendan, what did you think about Gentleman's Agreement?
It certainly explains maybe why this film was made, especially if you know the history of one Elia Kazan, or Kazan, I guess is how you pronounce his name. I've heard it both ways. And you look at his relationship with the anti-communist party specifically, right? Which I don't think we necessarily need to get into. I feel like if you are a film nerd, you know Elia's relationship with his actions during his HUAC testimony specifically, and how that ruffled some feathers for him in Hollywood. So I think that certainly speaks to his desire to make this movie, Gentleman's Agreement specifically, which was arguably his first notable quote-unquote issues movie. And he has delved with these things a lot in his movies in some way. So that makes sense. And I think for the time in 1947 when this came out, the overall concept of this movie about a Christian man, a Christian reporter, posing undercover in a sense as a Jewish man to learn about anti-Semitism, that is a compelling idea. In some ways, it's kind of an offensive idea. And I couldn't help but think of some of the sillier scenarios that we've seen in other movies where they take this similar approach but turn them into like comedic puff pieces. You know, movies like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, for instance, which is nothing like this movie. But I have to maybe give a movie like Gentleman's Agreement some appreciation for perhaps spearheading a narrative trend in a way, just for different genre reasons. I have respect for the movie in that regard. But if we hear the words from Elia Kazan himself, he is actually not the biggest fan of how this film came out. He actually thinks that the film isn't that great. And I kind of agree with him in a sense. I think this movie is a great metaphor but I don't know if it's a great movie. I think there is something about it, whether it be in Gregory Peck's performance, whether it be in the overall romance of the film, just the overall pacing and the structure of it. It doesn't feel like a completed film in many ways. I feel like there's something kind of checked out about it. I don't necessarily love Gregory Peck's performance. I've loved him in other films. I don't necessarily love the romance between Gregory Peck and Dorothy McGuire. I think they're both great actors, and I think they're technically both really good in the movie here. The whole first half of this movie feels like setup for the actual movie. and I think it takes a real while to really definitively decide what its goal is. And when it gets there, I'm not sure if it arrives at the most insightful conclusion to justify its really interesting idea. So I'm really torn on the movie as a movie. I love the idea of it for 1947 and what it means for America's relationship with regard to World War II and how it fits in this trajectory of Best Picture winners. But I think in this series thus far, it might be my least favorite movie we've talked about. I don't think it's quite there yet, and that's unfortunate because I like the ideas at play.
Yeah, it sounds like we're in a similar camp here. I'm with you. I admire what the film is aiming for, but I do think it is terribly misguided in its approach. This is a film that, where we see a character adopt trauma from another group of people trying to make it his own, and it does feel a little misguided. Like I understand. I might be looking at the film through a 2024 lens in that regard instead of
it is dated. It is
1947.
dated in that regard.
It is very, very dated, but I think it also speaks to some of the narrative issues that you're talking about there, because it's very easy to see Philip struggling with how he is wearing this mask. Again, he's trying to scrape by with someone else's face, trying to carry this trauma, even though it is not his. And it's something that he doesn't really have to bear. And it's something that he's willing, or maybe not willing, but it's something he's able to let go of and does as soon as his article is out, as we see.
He hasn't lost that privilege, even despite wearing these new shoes.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting to see how volatile that makes him throughout this film. I don't think it all works, but there is something a little like I'm struggling to find
icky, maybe.
Yeah. Like there is something a little icky about him inside that volatility as he lashes out at other characters, particularly his Jewish secretary that we see at the end of the film, that I do think beats the wrong drum. Like, I don't think that is at all what the film intended to, but it does come off as a little disingenuous. And I like the ideas that it is certainly aiming for here, as much as I do admire them. I don't know if the film is able to explore them with any sort of meaningful nuance or variation. A lot of this feels very on the surface. It's, I guess to put it plainly, this is a film that is about anti-Semitism, yes. However, I think it's mostly this film about complacency, and I wish that the film spent more time on that element of it, because that is where it gets interesting. When it's trying to, I guess, dig into its anti-Semitic roots and where that comes from. And you can really feel the seams of the film working when those things happen in this film. And boy, do they happen often here.
Yeah.
However, I think the film is much more compelling when it starts getting into those ideas of complacency and misguided liberalism. Like how
That's a good
that
point.
comes through at
That's
the
a
end of the
good
film,
point.
I think is fascinating because then it flips the mirror around, and instead of exploring like where does this anti-Semitism come from or why do people act this way, like those moments in the film are obvious, and yes, they're problematic, but again, I don't know if the film gets to any sort of solution there. But where it does tend to poke at something that is interesting is, what we see there at the end of the film with Kathy. And while she's affably fighting for justice and seems to say all of the right things, at the same time, you see how her good intentions are not as well informed as she thinks they are. Like that is like that to me is where the film gets the most interesting, but it's also too late by the time we get there.
I have a lot of thoughts on the third act here because I think there's a lot of great things here from the perspective of Kathy. To the point that I'm with you, I also kind of wish that maybe she was the main character in that regard, because I think the idea of someone that does stand up for justice without actually standing up for justice is a great idea. And we see that talked about nowadays a lot, that you've become very complacent about your surroundings, that just because you say that you support the rights of certain people, but you don't necessarily do or say anything about it, does that make you just as complicit in the problem? I think that's a really interesting idea. I think where the film stumbles in that regard is I feel like it also kind of makes Kathy out to be the bad guy when she, in a way, rightfully criticizes Phil for going out looking for anti-Semitic responses. That almost makes it seem like he's twisting the words of other people just for his own agenda. Like there are things that Phil does that I think are very problematic. And I think by the way it concludes, it almost makes it look like he was the white savior in all of this. Like, at least, like, given the form of reconciliation we see at the end between our two romantic characters, right? That romantic partnership there.
Yeah.
I think that was the wrong way to end this movie. I think
agree.
that completely undermines any potential interesting ideas that I think both characters represent. Because I think in that argument that they have, which I think is the best scene in the movie, like the quote unquote breakup scene is probably my favorite scene because it showcases two sides of an argument that I think have their own, I don't want to say villainous intent, but I can understand why you would be a little bit turned off by each of their perspectives, right? And the points that they make. So to see a reconciliation between the two of them at the end, I think it unwillingly takes a side. And that's where I think the movie does fall apart, and maybe why it does very much feel like a product of its time. I think in today's market, this would have ended in a much more daring way. I think it certainly would have retained a bit more boldness. I think it would have had more of a sense of tragedy to it. And I think that would have been the right way to do it. So perhaps that's just where the time capsule element of this movie rings true.
Yeah. Well, it might depend on who's making the film, because
maybe,
as you're talking there, I am reminded of Civil War and how apolitical it tries to be and fails in that. And hey, maybe picking a side is probably what would have given this film some conviction. And because I do agree with you, I think that's where this film loses any momentum that it had gained. And that argument scene that you're invoking there, I do think is compelling. However, at the same time, I feel distanced and disengaged from it because it's coming from two characters that are equally problematic.
Yeah.
The film does not seem to understand. And again, that's where I'm conflating 1947 and
2024. It's not the same time.
It's not the same, but I was not able to watch this film in 1947. So it is hard to separate the two, but there is a self-righteousness to Philip that the film lacks any awareness toward. And it does get to be particularly insufferable when he is lecturing again to his Jewish secretary. That was the worst moment of the film because he's sustaining this ruse all the time. the whole sequence, as if him doing this for 6 months all of a sudden gave him all the credibility in the world, which is obviously absurd.
I can't tell if that scene we're supposed to be applauding him, and I feel like an execution.
It felt like it was like good for you. It's
kind of like a heroic moment, and I'm with you. I couldn't help but feel like Phil is not a very good person by this point.
No.
He's kind of utilized his privilege that already existed in a new way that makes him even worse. It's like he's using his privilege to take advantage of an ethnicity now that's not even his. Like it's
not his, and that is the biggest sin the film makes, all while maintaining some sort of self-righteousness. And again, I do love that the film has conviction, and I do think those convictions are palpable at times, and that's where this film is at its strongest for sure. But when you're wearing someone else's trauma as this mask, something that he can take off at any moment if he chooses, it just doesn't sit all that well. And it does make the character a little bit disingenuous when all you're doing is wearing this costume for a couple of months for your own selfish gains, I might add, because he is writing for this national magazine. And it's something that he is going to acknowledge in the piece, which he does. Like that, the piece opens up with him admitting that I am a white Christian, but I pretended to be a Jew for a few months, and look at all the awful things that I experienced. That just doesn't carry as much weight as the Jewish community themselves talking to you about their issues. And that's where the Dave character here is by far the most captivating character of the film.
Should have had way more time, but he is so underserved here.
John Garfield is incredible in this film. He is absolutely fantastic. And when he does enter into the story, you really do sense the genuine qualities of the character, his experiences, how that's informed him into who he is. And most of what Philip regurgitates is things that Dave had told him would happen. And so it's not as if he's learning some of this firsthand because he is wearing the mask, but in a lot of ways it all stems from his relationship with Dave and the honesty that comes from that character. And I just don't think the film wrestling with Philip and that ruse and how that integrates into a lot of the conversations he has in this film. Now, at times, it is heartbreaking. Like, we'll talk about the moment he has with his son. Like, that's a great moment. But when he's talking to his Jewish secretary, not just talking, like lecturing as if I'm better than you for having this experience, or even when he's talking to Kathy there, he is treating her as like, I'm a better person. I'm the one that has a better understanding of this. And maybe he does, but at the same time, he's stealing that trauma. And
he's stealing that trauma, and he's trying to,
like, morally,
trying to educate,
he doesn't, morally, he doesn't have much ground to stand on.
In many ways, what he's doing is kind of abusive to the Jewish people of this time by taking advantage of them. In many ways, he's taking their experience. And I think that's even emblematic in how this film was represented at the Oscars, because this movie had 4 performances nominated. And of course, John Garfield was not one of them. So even the movie's success at the Academy Awards is emblematic of the film's problem, I think, is that it's utilizing the trauma of another group for compelling and selfish gains. And so in many ways, Phil himself is a reflection of the Academy at this time too. And and that's the problem. If there was at least some acknowledgement that what he was doing was very icky, like we're talking about, I think that makes the movie not only way more interesting, but actually really compelling and good. I think there's a version of this movie that exists that does that. And the execution here is not that. And that's the unfortunate reality.
I agree, because the more I think about that ending and why it's so stagey and artificial,
Mm-hmm.
circles back to the film's self-awareness with those two
Yeah.
characters, with Philip
Yeah.
and Kathy, because it wants us to be on the side of Philip. Look at him. He learned something genuine and he understands more. And Kathy is then forced to have this moment of recognition, this epiphany that I can't just sit there and not say anything, that me being apathetic toward this and listening to others in their anti-Semitism, and I'm becoming complacent and letting it happen, that's problematic. And therefore, I'm going to take an action.
Yeah.
And the action she takes is certainly going to ruffle feathers with friends and family, but I'm not just going to be complacent about this anymore. I have learned. I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
What does Philip learn? What does Philip do? And this to me is what makes the ending so disingenuous, because he's equally problematic, but the film never gives him a moment
It
to
makes it
wrestle
look like
with.
Kathy is the bad guy.
It makes her look like she's the bad guy when he is equally problematic. And instead, the film simply shows him as this white savior, as you talked about. And, oh, well, Kathy finally saw the white light. Now we can get back together. That, to me, I mean,
first off, they didn't have much romantic chemistry to begin with. So,
and look, I know there's a larger debate to be had about morality and art doesn't have to invoke your morals all the time. And how many times do you see film Twitter throughout the year just lean into, and not just lean into, but actively praise debauchery we see on screen in movies? It happens all the time. So it's not as if we need art to reflect, like the highest judgment of morals that humanity, can abide by.
Yeah.
However, my problem isn't that the behavior is appalling. The issue is the film doesn't think that it's appalling behavior and doesn't want to wrestle with it.
It doesn't recognize it, which is unfortunate, because I do think there are some interesting ideas brought up in that first half, really more in the first third, as the film does set up its central conceit. When Phil starts telling people that he is Jewish, it's actually surprisingly easy to convince everyone that he's Jewish. Like, it doesn't take any work. And I think that's a pretty interesting thing, that the film's able to avoid certain stereotypes, that all he has to do is tell people he's Jewish and people automatically believe it. I think that's a really interesting idea to show the point of, like, why are we so different then? If I can do this easily without any effort, like, it makes the stereotyping all the more egregious. Like, I think that's a pretty interesting notion there. And there's even a moment he has at this party where he networks with this one professor that has some really interesting insight on how he doesn't even tell people he's Jewish anymore, because he says something like, quote, "The world makes it an advantage not to be a Jew." And then even goes on to talk about the difference between Judaism as a religion versus an ethnicity, which is a very topical thing right now. Like, that's a very topical question for many people. Like, it's in those moments where I feel like the movie was kind of predictive in certain things. And I will give it some credit, if credit is due anywhere, in some of those conversational pieces. But they're all there for the setup. And they don't conclude or coalesce into a worthy argument on what I think the film is trying to wrestle with and fails to wrestle in with, as we're talking about. I think it squanders all that potential.
Yeah, I agree, especially because from scene to scene, as we noted earlier, you see the mechanics of the film working in terms of setting up these social interactions, or these moments where the anti-Semitism is so obvious.
Yeah.
For Philip to experience that and then internalize it for an article that we never get to read.
I know.
And
it's brushed off pretty quickly.
And the
but
only
but we're
time-
told that it's one of the best pieces that the paper has ever written. So I guess, you know, exposition tells us it's important.
Exactly. You know, and the only time that it is brought out in Philip is in these other conversations we talked about earlier, whether it be with Kathy, or there is a moment with Anne near the end of the film, or, you know, like it comes out in these small moments that, again, are kind of, they're reflecting his experience in broad strokes, and not necessarily the specifics of these things that he's experiencing. And because Philip never really wrestles with his ruse, he never sees it as something that he's done that's morally gray or whatever. Yeah. It just makes those encounters all the more manufactured.
Oh yeah.
In terms of the scene to scene. Now, there are a couple of times where I do think the film slows down to wrestle with something genuine. And that's, you know, like the moment that comes to mind the most is the one I mentioned earlier, the moment with the son. And that's where he has to confront the idea, Philip does, that this is a facade that he's carrying. Because his son, at one point, we're told, is harassed and bullied, at least verbally. I can't remember if there's any physicality to the altercation.
I think it was just verbal, but I mean, that's all it needed to be.
That's all it needed to be. You see that he is really, he's recoiling in the moment. He's really struggling with being told these awful things. And Philip has to talk to him about why someone would do that, why these kids would bully him. But he has to make sure that his kid isn't going to go to school and ruin the gag, which in and of itself is extremely murky.
Yeah.
Like, and that happens a couple of times. Like the first time he talks to his son about, are we really Jewish or are we not? And he's like, well, no, not really, but I'm doing a movie trick or whatever he says there.
Yeah. But then he has to tell his son that in a way that doesn't, you know, undermine Judaism and when compared to Christianity. That doesn't say Christianity is better. You know, like that is a hard way to communicate that to a child.
Exactly. So he's having to communicate that they're equal. One isn't better than the other. Also, don't go to school and tell anyone because this is fake.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy. Like that's insane that he has to tell his kid that. And then, you know, and it's played like for pragmatism, I guess, in the first time. The second time when he comes home and he's having to deal with his boy and these things that he had heard, and while he still has to, you know, console him and comfort him, you know, like what these kids are doing isn't great, and some people, you know, they feel these awful feelings and they take it out on people in that way. Also, don't tell anyone. Like he still has to maintain the ruse. Like it's crazy.
That's
like,
and
it's in that scene especially, it comes off wild because his son, who is not Jewish, had just experienced these awful things, and as he's comforting him, he still has to make sure that when he goes to school the next day, you don't give this up. Like I do appreciate that moment happens. Like Philip is forced to have that moment. I don't know if it does enough to really wrestle with how.
It's a great scene in a vacuum. That's what it is. Like there's a great story there.
Yeah. It's crazy like how egregious that is. And I wish the film wrestled with that more, but I'm glad that it at least exists in the movie. And you do see Philip recoil a little bit to what had happened to his son.
And of course, the two best performances in the movie are the ones that don't get nominated for Oscars. One being John Garfield, like we talked about, and here the son. And did you know who plays the son, right? Dean Stockwell, who was Harry Dean Stanton's brother in Paris, Texas.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
No, I did not realize that. No.
That's incredible. But I think, they're the two best performers in the movie because I feel like they're the only ones that are acknowledging the potential nuance of this situation, that there is more underneath the surface than the broad strokes that this movie is addressing. And that's so unfortunate. We often criticize journalism nowadays for too often relishing in broad strokes because that's what gets clicks. The broad strokes is what gets clicks. This movie is basically about how a guy poses undercover to make the biggest clickbait article of the 1940s. That's like it is basically a puff piece, is how it comes off as.
Yep.
But it's meant to be this form of heroism, and it's so frustrating that it doesn't earn that. It's so
I agree.
frustrating.
My favorite performance in the film, hands down, is Celeste Holm.
Okay,
maybe
she's
not
good.
my favorite. John Garfield gives the best performance because he's asked to give weight to a film that is otherwise kind of weightless. But Celeste Holm is having the time of her life, and it is electric.
She's good.
So good.
She's good. I'm with you. She's good. She's good.
She's ravishing in this film, and I do love how she gives the film a jolt for all of its hefty themes and its weighty ideas, and it is a film that lingers in the seriousness of its topics. Yeah. And here comes Anne just giving the film this electric beauty that I just absolutely adored. She's incredible here.
With a surprising moment of catharsis at the end that's pretty jolting. She was one of the performers that she actually did win the Oscar for her performance in this movie. And that's you can understand that. It's it definitely sticks out in the right ways. It's maybe the loudest performance in the movie, but that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing.
But in a great way.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. And that moment you're talking about at the end, I think, is really fantastic because you do sense the chemistry between her and Philip in those early scenes. And as they're hanging out and talking, I was simply rooting for them more than I ever was Philip and Kathy throughout this film.
And I love Dorothy McGuire as an actress. I think she's gorgeous. I think she's great in many things. One of my childhood favorite movies is Old Yeller, and I think she's so great in that movie. But from a chemistry standpoint, Gregory Peck and Celeste Holm, that should have been the matchup. That should have been the pairing. At least
that should have been the pairing.
If this movie is also trying to function as a romance, which it is, like in fact, it's kind of primarily functioning as a romance, which might be its biggest problem. But if you are going to still do that, your two lead actors need to have the right chemistry to justify it. And I think Peck and Holm are the ones better suited to make that happen, at least in the small amounts of screen time they have together.
Yeah, I agree. Like I do think the film gave itself the avenue for Philip and Anne to perhaps develop something or give like the film was never going to just be like, forget Kathy, I'm going to go be with Anne. That was never going to happen, especially in 1947.
Right.
However, well, actually I take that back. I totally take that back because in this in this whole movie series, there's been at least a couple of films.
We've got about Casablanca, right?
We've talked about triangles and people cheating on each other, and it's just like, no, that's just part of the time.
And Avengers moments where someone says, "I'm going to break that marriage up."
Hell yeah! Like I love that.
Teresa Wright, the greatest hero of this whole movie series, if you ask me.
I was waiting for Anne the whole time to be like, you know what? I'm going to break up that engagement. And she more or less kind of does, I guess, at the end of the film.
But then it just kind of gets ignored as if it never happened. It's kind of a meaningless scene in context of the whole movie, right?
I agree. No, it doesn't really lead to anything. Same thing even with Philip's mother throughout this film. Doesn't lead to anything.
I feel like it's just there for dramatic conflict. Yeah, it's like it's just there to make us feel bad for Philip. It's adding to the manufactured quality as if it's trying to trick us into thinking Phil's a good person. I feel like that's what it's doing.
Exactly.
And the scenes with his mother, I think, are pretty tender. I buy them as a mother-son pairing. I think it works, but I feel like I'm sensing the puppet strings at play because of how it fits within this specific movie. Like it feels like it is trying to trick us into thinking, oh yeah, this Phil guy, he's actually a good guy. Like you're supposed to like him. And this is why he loves his mother. He treats his mother well. I feel like that's all it's doing.
I agree. And maybe that's where Gregory Peck's performance And it has been, it's pretty well known now that Peck and Kazan did not get along when making this film. They did not see eye to eye. Now, I do believe that there was an interview with Gregory Peck later on where he realized that we did not see eye to eye. I didn't understand the emotional nuance he was going for. And if I could redo the film now, I think I could give him exactly what he wanted. But I do think it is absolutely a big part of this film. His performance, I think, is it just isn't very good, and
it seems disconnected. Honestly,
it seems disconnected, and time has not been kind to it all that much either. Because when you combine his performance with all of these other qualities that we've talked about with Philip, that the film just refuses to wrestle with and acknowledge, there is not much redeeming about Philip as a character.
No, there isn't.
And
you're right.
Peck's performance doesn't inject any charm or anything that would draw us to the character. It'd be one thing if the character is, morally ambiguous and murky.
Meant to be a little bit icky, like we're talking about. And I think
go ahead. Let me finish the thought. But yes, if it's meant to be ambiguous and murky, yet he brings an infectious charm to the performance, and he draws us in with what he's doing on screen and on camera, then maybe you have a little bit of a different reaction to the character. But when you have the performance you get and the writing that you get, and then throughout the whole film, you're like, this guy's just insufferable. Like, he might be learning lessons and realizing that anti-Semitism is more widespread and brazen than he thought previously, and it's a problem, and as a country, we need to address it. Like, the lessons learned are more than valid. But the reasons in which he learned those things, again, extremely, extremely murky. So despite the lessons learned and how valid they are, there's not much about the character that goes, you know what, I think I like this guy.
Well, yeah, I that's why I think his performance is disconnected in a lot of ways, because I think it's very one note that if there is an arc, I didn't see it. So it's ironic because apparently even Celeste Holm has said she didn't have any fun working with Gregory Peck either. So clearly, when someone is disconnected in the making of a movie, whether it be a director or an actor, in this case, maybe someone like Gregory Peck, that's going to strain the relationship with everyone else making the movie with them. And that's probably what's happening there. But yeah, it just seems like he didn't understand the material or something, because if he brought some kind of charm to this, then it at least matches what I think the film is going for. But his coldness, that seems to suggest the nuance that maybe we are trying to get from the movie that the movie's then not giving us. So if anything, I feel like the big disconnect is the movie Hollywood wants to produce and the performance that Peck is maybe inadvertently giving. It's like that coldness and that despondency would have probably benefited a movie that is a bit more self-aware and that ickiness that we're talking about, right? And the movie itself seems like it's completely oblivious to that, like we're talking about. So that makes his performance feel like it's out of left field. It feels like it's from a completely different movie. Gregory Peck has given much better performances, and I can't believe he was nominated for this one. I don't think it's a good performance.
Yeah, I don't think it's great either. I don't want to say that it's actively bad. Like, your phrasing of disconnected, I think, is really appropriate here. Yeah. He just doesn't seem like he's on the same page with Kazan or any of the writing here, and it does make the character very cold. And it's, it makes for a lot of gawkishness throughout the film. Which is what his character is doing. Which is so ironic given Elia Kazan's history as a filmmaker. He was sort of known for letting his actors do the whole method acting thing. I mean, he's worked with Marlon Brando twice. Another movie we might talk about if we do the 50s, right? For Best Picture Series. On the Waterfront. Great movie. Streetcar Named Desire. Love that film too. Great movie. East of Eden. Great performance there from James Dean. Yeah.
Have you seen A Face in the Crowd, the film that basically introduced Andy Griffith?
I don't think that I have. I
That's
don't think
another
so.
great movie. The
Yeah.
point here is that Elia Kazan's made a lot of great movies that I still love to this day. Gentleman's Agreement, sorry, is not one of them. I don't think it is.
No, I'm with you. I don't like this film all that much too. In fact, I wasn't sure if I could go this far coming into the conversation. I wanted to wait to have the conversation, but my immediate thought after watching the film was, I think this is my least favorite we've covered so far.
It's not even close. It is. It's my least favorite of the ones we've covered.
Yeah. And again, it's not like what it's aiming for. I really do appreciate. I love the convictions it has. I just think that its execution is pretty woeful.
Yeah.
And also just it's the opportunities, the missed opportunities, because I do think it introduces, again, far too late, but the biggest surprise of the film is those ideas of misguided liberalism we see at the end. I think that's fantastic. If that's what this whole film would have been, I mean, holy Lord. I mean, talk about a film that would have been decades ahead of its time and something that's still extremely relevant today.
Agreed.
And I'm glad that even in 1947, they were willing to address those ideas.
Yeah.
In the film, it's a little bit too late. But the whole idea with Kathy and letting these things slide and why that's not okay. It's great. The villainizing of her inside of that, though, don't love that.
Which I don't. Well, I don't mind that if Phil was rightfully
and that's what I mean.
As another villain. That's
exactly
the thing. Yeah.
That's that, and I guess that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah,
like
but the one-sidedness of that villainy is the problem.
Yes, because she does absolutely miss the mark in terms of her response to some of the things that Philip and eventually Dave talked to her about. Like, there's no doubt that her liberalism was misguided at times.
Yeah, yeah.
It is a lesson to be learned for sure.
Absolutely.
But when you contrast that to Philip, that's what makes it
problematic. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
Okay.
Not
Any
a great
final
movie.
thoughts?
Not a great movie. And looking at the films it was up against for Best Picture, I haven't seen everything here. I have seen Miracle on 34th Street, which I think is an adorable film. That's an adorable film. And I think that was probably my favorite of the five if I had seen all of them. At least I would guess, given my appreciation of that film. I have seen Great Expectations because I know I've seen a few of David Lean's earlier films. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I know I remember liking it quite a bit. So I'm sure I would like this over this one. But those are the other two that I've seen in the five there.
Yeah. Great Expectations was going to be the one that I noted. I would absolutely have voted for that over Gentleman's Agreement. And I'm with you. Miracle on 34th Street. Love that film, or like adorable little film. Very much do agree with you there.
Yep, absolutely.
The Bishop's Wife, I don't believe I have seen. That would be a first time watch for me. So
same with Crossfire. Yeah, haven't seen those two.
Gentleman's Agreement. Not too much of a fan of the film.
I don't agree with that gentleman.
No, absolutely not. But I
terrible pun, but
I do respect Kazan though for sticking to his convictions because they very much tried to get him to not make this movie.
Yeah,
and he went ahead with it anyway.
And if it got him to make better movies because of it, then I'm glad it exists. I'm glad it exists in this way because, like I said, I've loved a lot of his films. And if he had to make this in order for a movie like On the Waterfront to get made, in order for East of Eden and A Streetcar Named Desire to get made, then I'm glad it's here. I'm glad this movie got made in the way that it did, in the flaws and all. I'm glad it exists in this way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I am looking forward to moving on to next week. We got two more with Hamlet and All the King's Men. Hamlet, it's William Shakespeare.
I have seen that
Olivier.
one. It's been a while. I think I saw it back in high school. So this will be one of those situations where it technically isn't a first time watch for me, but it might feel like one nowadays because it has been so long. So I get a 1.5 first time watch or something like that, maybe. Yeah. But all the King's Men I have not seen.
Okay. Yeah, I have not seen that one either. So
yeah,
very much looking forward to seeing Hamlet, a film that went up against The Red Shoes, The Treasure of Sierra Madre.
Well, I already know it wasn't the best of those movies. That I'll just simply say that. There's no way it's better than The Red Shoes.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll talk about Hamlet in 1948 next week. As you know, the country and Hollywood was certainly turning away from the war.
It was, yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily think we'll get into the 1950s immediately. We probably will pick a different decade.
Maybe.
But yeah, I mean, even when you look at 1950, 51, like, you start to see the country expanding into a lot of different things, which is exciting. There's an eclectic mix of winners there for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you.
But yeah, this has been fun. I've enjoyed it despite Gentleman's Agreement. This has been a fun series so far. We'll round out with Hamlet and All the King's Men in the next 2 weeks. With that, if you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here, please leave a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. All right, as we wind down here, just a quick plug for our reviews that we had last week. We had a great conversation with Diego Crespo on Bad Boys Ride or Die. Please go and check it out. It was a lot of fun.
We rode, and we did not die.
It was fantastic. We also had a great conversation on Evil Does Not Exist. I really loved how that turned out. I hope people enjoy it. Yeah. If you want to go and give that one a go. This week, we have 2 very different movies. We will, of course, talk about Inside Out 2, as we teased earlier in the episode. We'll talk about why that's a really good hockey movie. And then we're going to talk about Tuesday while recording on a Monday after I saw it on a Saturday.
That's not confusing. Especially if you're coupling it with these 2 reviews, it's almost like you want to say Inside Out Tuesday.
Yeah, and it'll be released on a Thursday. So there's that.
We don't believe in Tuesday as a day. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we're gonna be talking about the film Tuesday, and in which I'm going to yell at Brendan because I did not know exactly what I was walking into. I knew that I knew that it dealt with death in some way, in this metaphysical way. I did not realize exactly what I was walking into. So,
all right. Well, I apologize for that already.
Brendan is in a little bit of trouble. We'll talk about that later on in the week. So be on the lookout for that. Want to just plug Women in Session as well. Kristen and Jaylon had a really great conversation talking about their favorite Pride films. There was another Chasing the Gold where Hector came back for round 2. More cans talk. So go and check that out with him and Shadon. And I believe that is it as far as plugs go. And of course, there's great writing on the website. Dave and his team are always doing great work there. I think that is it. Am I missing anything, Brendan?
I don't think so. I just once again urge everyone to check out our review of Evil Does Not Exist. I think it was one of our better conversations we've had thus far in the year, JD.
Yes.
And I guess, spoiler alert, we do think it is one of the best films of the year. I think when we get to our mid-year report, whether it be on both our lists or at least one of our lists, it's going to be talked about. That film, I think we can guarantee, is going to be talked about.
Yep, that one will be mentioned. I virtually guarantee that. Yes, it'll be mentioned in one way.
Really interesting movie.
Yeah, very, very interesting to talk about. I definitely echo Brendan's thoughts there. Please go and see that film. And if you want to check out the review, we would greatly appreciate that as well.
Absolutely.
As far as any final thoughts, one, I just want to say, if you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really appreciate those that do that. If you're watching or listening, rather, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, rate and review us on those platforms. Really helps out the show. If you want to support us, I do want to mention this. We have a new VIP episode that is going to be out or might be out by the time this goes live. I'm not sure which.
Right.
But Brendan and I talk about, drum roll, Star Wars, because the discourse is out of control again. Out of control.
It's never not.
So
but now the lightsaber is even brighter than ever before.
Yes. So if you want to hear that, go to Patreon. Find us on Patreon, patreon.com/InSessionFilm. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, get an Apple Podcast subscription, or join the YouTube membership. So if you go to our YouTube channel, just click on join there, become a member, and you'll get access to all of these all the VIP episodes there. So we appreciate everyone that is doing that.
Absolutely.
As far as a final thought, no Stanley Cups in South Florida quite yet.
Not quite
yet,
no.
But maybe close. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe next week we'll be celebrating the
I
Stanley
hope
Cup
so.
here in South Florida.
I do have a final thought on my end. I have to wish my wife Maris a very safe trip as we're recording this. She's about to make a 2-week trip to Europe. It's actually pretty interesting. We found some really interesting connections here that almost made it seem weirdly serendipitous. So she's going to Vienna and then she's going to Madrid for a work trip. So of course, going to Vienna, we look at each other and we thought, we're going to rewatch Before Sunrise. Let's rewatch Before Sunrise. We found a couple connections in that movie that were just really interesting for the timing of all of this, because the first thing that Jesse, Ethan Hawke's character, says at one point is that he's going to Vienna to fly out of there, but that he just came from Madrid, right?
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And then when it ends, where they talk about, let's meet up in 6 months, they say, okay, from today or from yesterday? What day was that? Oh, June 16th. Which is today as we're recording this.
That's
so it's
crazy.
It's like, I guess her and I were destined to watch this movie together at this time, and she was destined to make this trip. It was
That's funny.
Weird. It was weird,
really
man.
weird. That's crazy. Well, hopefully she has a good trip and has a good time for sure.
Yeah.
With that, we'll go ahead and get out of here for this week. Stay tuned for those reviews. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Inside Out. Rules.
Hockey rules.